who's seemingly running for his life out of an airport to never be seen again. It's been almost 10 years, and not a single person has seen him since.
July 8th, 2014, Varna Airport, Bulgaria. A young German tourist named Lars Mittank appears on CCTV footage, calmly walking through the terminal one moment and suddenly sprinting away in apparent terror the next. He dashes toward the exit, drops his luggage, and runs across the parking lot toward a nearby forest. He scales a fence with surprising agility and disappears. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Lars Mittank for over a decade. For 11 years, his disappearance remained one of Europe's most baffling missing persons cases.
In the north of Germany, in a small town outside of Berlin, life for 28-year-old Lars Mittank was ordinary in ways that most people would recognize. He was born in 1986, raised by his mother in a working-class family, and grew up with the typical rhythms of school, football, and friendships that formed the backbone of his world. Those who knew Lars described him as cheerful, dependable, and friendly, the kind of person who was easy to like and easy to trust. He was tall, blonde, with a lean frame, a warm smile, and a slightly shy demeanor that hid beneath it a good sense of humor. Lars wasn't the loudest in the group of friends, but he was always included. Always the kind of guy who said yes to an adventure. His life had the comfortable ordinariness of a young German man finding his way into adulthood. He worked steadily as a technician, not the kind of job that made headlines, but one that paid the bills and gave him structure. He enjoyed his evenings watching football, especially cheering for his team, Werder Bremen, and meeting with friends for drinks and laughs. He had a good relationship with his mother, who was proud of her son's stability and warmth. There was no shadow in his past, no record of mental illness or erratic behavior. He wasn't the type to disappear, wasn't the type to attract trouble. He was, by all accounts, a perfectly normal young man. In June of 2014, like so many Europeans, Lars was looking forward to a summer holiday. He and 4 of his friends decided to head south to Bulgaria, to the resort town of Golden Sands on the Black Sea. Golden Sands was well known among young Europeans for its beaches, nightlife, and affordable prices. It had become a party capital for tourists from Germany, the UK, and across the continent. A place where people came to drink, dance, and forget about the stresses of work. For Lars and his friends, it promised sun, fun, and a chance to relax away from the routines of home. The group set out on June 30th, flying to Varna Airport before making their way to the Golden Sands Resort. They checked into a modest hotel, nothing extravagant but close enough to the bars and beaches that they could enjoy the pulse of the holiday atmosphere. For the first days, everything went as expected. The friends drank beer together on the beach, lounged in the sun, ate cheap food at the seaside restaurants, and partied into the night at clubs that thumped with electronic music until dawn. Lars was not the wildest of the group, but he was happy to be there, to join in the camaraderie, to laugh and let loose. Golden Sands in the summer was a strange mix of paradise and chaos. The Black Sea glistened under the sun, while beachfront bars offered endless alcohol, and young tourists poured into the streets like pilgrims in search of a hedonistic rite of passage. But beneath the laughter and music, there was an undercurrent of volatility. Fights were not uncommon, spurred by alcohol and national rivalries. Football allegiances, in particular, could ignite sparks among young men eager to defend the honor of their teams. It was in this atmosphere that Lars' holiday took a turn point one night. While drinking with his friends, Lars got into an argument with a group of men, reportedly over football. Accounts vary, but it seems the dispute was between supporters of Werder Bremen, Lars' team, and fans of Bayern Munich. The argument escalated, voices rose, and before long, fists flew. Lars was caught in the fray, punched, and beaten. In the chaos, he suffered a ruptured eardrum. The pain was immediate and severe, leaving him reeling. His friends helped him back to the hotel, and the next morning they urged him to see a doctor at a local clinic. A physician examined Lars and confirmed the ruptured eardrum. The injury wasn't life-threatening, but it was serious enough that the doctor advised him not to fly until it healed. Flying with a ruptured eardrum could cause excruciating pain and potentially permanent damage. Lars was prescribed an antibiotic, cefprozil, and told to rest. His friends, with flights already booked, offered to stay behind with him, but Lars insisted they return home. He assured them he would be fine, that he would follow the doctor's orders and catch a later flight once he was cleared to travel. Reluctantly, they left him, and Lars was alone in Golden Sands. It was at this point that the first cracks appeared, small and subtle, but enough to alarm those closest to him. Lars called his mother back in Germany and told her about the fight and the injury. He explained that the doctor had advised him not to fly. At first, his mother wasn't overly concerned. It seemed straightforward enough. But then Lars added something strange. He said he felt unsafe. He said he thought the men who had attacked him were still following him. His voice carried a nervous edge. Unlike anything she had heard from him before, his mother tried to reassure him. She told him to stay calm, to rest, to take his medication, and to wait for the doctor's clearance. But Lars insisted that something was wrong. He said men were after him, that he had to be careful. It was an odd claim from someone who had always been rational and grounded. At first, she thought maybe it was the stress of being injured and alone in a foreign country. But the unease in his voice lingered with her. Over the next few days, Lars' paranoia seemed to grow. He moved out of his hotel for reasons that weren't clear. He checked into a cheaper place near the airport, telling his mother that he didn't feel safe where he had been. The new hotel staff later described him as acting nervously, pacing in the halls, glancing over his shoulder. At one point, he told his mother he had hidden from a group of men who were following him. Another time, he said he didn't trust the people around him. By July 7th, Lars had booked a flight home for the next day. His mother, relieved, told him she would wire him money and that she would be waiting for him in Berlin. But even then, Lars seemed unsettled. He called her late that night and whispered into the phone, saying he was hiding, that people were after him. She asked who, but he couldn't explain. He just kept repeating that he was in danger. On the morning of July 8th, 2014, Lars went to Varna airport for his flight home. He checked in, carrying only a small bag. At the airport, he visited the medical office to get final clearance to fly. The doctor who examined him found him visibly anxious, his pupils dilated, his behavior erratic. The doctor suggested he might still need to rest before flying. But as they spoke, something seemed to snap in Lars. Suddenly, he stood up, muttered something about not wanting to die there, and bolted out of the office. Airport CCTV cameras captured what happened next. Lars sprinted out of the terminal building, leaving behind his luggage, wallet, phone, and passport. He dashed through the sliding doors, ran across the parking lot, and disappeared into a field beyond the airport fence. Witnesses said he was running with the intensity of someone being chased, though no one was behind him. That was the last confirmed sighting of Lars Mittank in the years since. The footage of Lars fleeing the airport has been watched millions of times online. His disappearance has become one of the most infamous unsolved cases of the modern era, sparking endless theories, debates, and speculation. Was he suffering from psychosis, triggered by medication or head trauma? Was he being followed, as he believed? Or did something darker happen to him after he vanished into the fields? But before the mystery of that airport sprint, before the paranoia and fear, there was just Lars, a young man on holiday with friends, living a life as ordinary as any. Until something happened that pushed him into the pages of one of Europe's most haunting unsolved mysteries. After his friends flew back to Germany, Lars was left behind in Bulgaria. And though he tried to project confidence that he could handle the situation, he quickly began to unravel. Golden Sands, which had felt lively and exciting when the group first arrived together, now seemed overwhelming and hostile when experienced alone. The same streets that had been full of music, laughter, and the reckless joy of tourists now pressed down on him with an alien energy. Without the safety of his friends, Lars found himself hyper-aware of every sound, every movement, every group of strangers on the beach or in the bars. He was suddenly an outsider, an isolated man in a place that no longer felt safe. He told his mother that he was uneasy, that he couldn't shake the feeling that someone was following him. At first, she tried to reason with him. He was alone in a foreign country, injured, stressed. It was natural to feel anxious. But Lars insisted there was more to it. He said he saw men outside the hotel who looked like the same ones from the fight. He said he thought they were waiting for him, watching his movements, plotting to hurt him. His mother didn't know what to make of it. He had never been the paranoid type, never shown signs of delusion. Still, he seemed lucid enough to take practical steps. He left the resort hotel in Golden Sands, moving to a cheaper place closer to Varna Airport, about 15 kilometers away. The new hotel, Hotel Color, was less crowded, less noisy, less obvious, or at least that was what Lars seemed to believe. To the staff, though, his behavior was alarming. They later described how he paced the hallways, how he seemed nervous and distracted. He would check in and out of his room at odd hours, sometimes disappearing for stretches of time and returning looking shaken. On one occasion, hotel security cameras caught Lars running out of the building in the middle of the night, disappearing into the darkness, only to return hours later at dawn. When asked what had happened, he muttered something about being chased, about men outside. The staff didn't press him, but they remembered his wide, frightened eyes, the way he looked over his shoulder even inside the safety of the lobby. Lars called his mother often during these days. In one call, his voice trembled as he whispered that he was hiding. He said people were after him, that he didn't know what to do. His mother asked who, but he couldn't explain. He only repeated that he was in danger. At one point, he begged her to cancel his credit card, afraid that someone might use it to track him. She complied, worried but still uncertain whether her son was exaggerating or whether something real was happening around him. The strange part was that Lars was not drinking, not taking drugs, not the kind of man to hallucinate or spin paranoid stories out of nothing. The only medication he had been prescribed was cefprozil, an antibiotic for his ear injury. Though rare, there are cases of antibiotics, especially when combined with other factors like stress, head trauma, or dehydration, contributing to sudden psychological reactions. Whether this was the trigger in Lars' case remains debated, but at the time, all anyone knew was that his mind seemed to be spinning into fear back in Germany. His mother listened helplessly as Lars unraveled from afar. She suggested he go to the police, but he didn't trust them. He said he didn't know who was safe. He said he had to stay hidden until he could fly home. She urged him to stay calm, to go to the airport, to come back as soon as possible. He promised her he would try. On July 7th, Lars booked a flight home for the following day. His mother, relieved, arranged to send him money and told him she would be waiting at the Berlin airport. Lars said he would call her when he reached Varna airport. But that night, his paranoia peaked. He phoned his mother again, whispering that he was hiding from 4 men who were after him. His words were disjointed, fearful, and his mother could do nothing but plead with him to stay safe until morning. At Hotel Color, staff noticed his agitation. He barely ate, barely slept, moving nervously between his room and the lobby, sometimes peering out the windows as though expecting someone to appear. Other guests saw him pacing outside the building, muttering to himself, glancing over his shoulder. To those around him, he seemed like a man hunted, but whether by real people or imagined threats, no one could say. In the early hours of July 8th, Lars checked out of the hotel. He told the staff he had to catch his flight. He carried only a small bag, leaving behind personal items he no longer seemed to care about. He climbed into a taxi and made his way toward Varna airport. His behavior still erratic, but his goal clear: get back to Germany, get back to safety, get back to his mother. The taxi driver later recalled that Lars sat tensely in the back seat, gripping his bag tightly, looking out the window as though watching for pursuers. He didn't make small talk, didn't relax even for a moment. When they arrived at the airport, Lars paid quickly and moved inside, heading straight for the medical office to see the airport doctor. He needed clearance to fly with his ruptured eardrum. Without it, the airline might not let him board. At the medical office, the doctor examined him and noted his injury. Physically, Lars was not in immediate danger. The ear was healing, though slowly. The doctor advised him to wait a little longer before flying, concerned that the change in cabin pressure could cause severe pain or complications. But during the exam, Lars grew visibly anxious. The doctor observed that his pupils were dilated, his hands trembling. He seemed distracted, listening not only to the doctor but to sounds outside the room. At one point, a construction worker entered the office for a routine maintenance task. Lars froze, his face shifting from nervousness to outright panic. He muttered something about not wanting to die there, then suddenly leapt to his feet. Without warning, Lars bolted out of the office, sprinting through the airport corridors. Surveillance cameras captured every moment. A tall, blond man in a dark t-shirt, running with a desperation that suggested life or death. He dashed past stunned travelers, through the sliding glass doors, and out into the parking lot. He didn't stop. He ran across the pavement, through the cars, and toward the fence at the edge of the airport grounds. Witnesses later described him climbing over the barrier and vanishing into the fields beyond. His bag, his wallet, his phone, even his passport, everything he needed to travel, was left behind at the airport. All he carried with him was the terror that propelled him into the open fields. That was the last confirmed sighting of Lars Mittank. The image of Lars running out of Varna airport on the morning of July 8, 2014, became one of the most haunting pieces of surveillance footage in modern true crime history. There he was, a young man in a black t-shirt and shorts, sprinting through the terminal as though chased by an unseen predator, crashing through the sliding glass doors and into the blinding Bulgarian sunlight. Travelers turned their heads in confusion. Some thought it was a prank, others assumed he was late for a flight. But for Lars, it was neither. He wasn't running toward anything. He was running away. The cameras tracked him as he tore across the parking lot, weaving between cars, his arms pumping with the frantic energy of someone in mortal danger. At the edge of the lot stood a wire fence separating the airport grounds from a nearby field. Without hesitation, Lars scrambled over it, landing in the tall grass beyond. From there, the cameras could follow no further. Witnesses reported seeing him disappear into the trees that bordered the field, his figure shrinking until it was swallowed by the green expanse. After that, Lars Mittank was gone. Inside the airport, staff were left bewildered. His luggage remained in the medical office, along with his wallet, passport, and phone. Everything a man would need to leave the country and return home was abandoned in an instant. Security was notified, and authorities searched the immediate area around the airport. They combed the fields, the nearby roads, and the patches of woodland, expecting to find Lars collapsed or hiding. But he was nowhere to be seen. Back in Germany, his mother waited for his call. She believed that in just a few hours, her son would land in Berlin and step into her arms, shaken but safe. Instead, she received a phone call telling her that Lars had run from the airport and vanished. Panic seized her. None of it made sense. He had been so close, his ticket booked, his bag packed, his mother waiting. Why would he flee at the very moment he was about to escape the place he claimed terrified him? Bulgarian police launched an investigation, but progress was slow. They interviewed the airport doctor, who described Lars as visibly anxious and paranoid, his pupils dilated, his behavior erratic. They interviewed hotel staff, who confirmed that Lars had spoken of being chased and had acted strangely in the days leading up to his disappearance. They reviewed surveillance footage from the airport, which showed no sign of anyone pursuing him. Lars had been alone, fleeing from something no one else could see. Search parties spread out from the airport into the surrounding countryside. The area was a mix of farmland, woodland, and small villages, bordered by the Black Sea to the east. Farmers were questioned, and fields were scoured for signs of a man on the run. But no trace of Lars was found. Not a shoe, not a piece of clothing, not a body. It was as though he had dissolved into the Bulgarian landscape. Back home, his mother became the beating heart of the search. She gave interviews, plastered posters with her son's photo, and begged anyone with information to come forward. She described her last calls with Lars, his whispered fears, his insistence that men were following him, his strange request to cancel his credit cards. She painted the picture of a son who had never before shown paranoia, who had never vanished without explanation. As the days turned into weeks, theories began to swirl. The simplest was that Lars had suffered a mental breakdown. Some experts pointed to his ruptured eardrum and the antibiotics he was prescribed. Though cefprozil is not widely known to cause hallucinations, there have been rare reports of antibiotics triggering psychiatric side effects in vulnerable individuals. Combined with the trauma of the fight, the stress of being alone, and perhaps a concussion from the beating, it was possible Lars had spiraled into acute psychosis. In this state, he may have believed men were after him, and when confronted with the routine presence of a construction worker in the doctor's office, his delusion tipped into full-blown panic. But if it was psychosis, where had he gone? How could a man survive vanishing into the Bulgarian countryside without food, money, or identification? Had he collapsed somewhere out of sight, his body undiscovered? Or had he wandered into danger, drowning in a river, struck by a car, or falling victim to the elements? Others suspected foul play. Golden Sands had a reputation for petty crime, gangs, and occasional drug-related violence. Lars' insistence that men were following him may not have been pure delusion. Could the men from the fight have returned to target him again? Could he have stumbled into criminal activity he wasn't supposed to witness? Some theorists speculated that he had been threatened or coerced, and his panic at the airport was not hallucination but the final desperate attempt of a man who knew real danger was closing in. There were even stranger theories. Some suggested Lars had chosen to disappear voluntarily, starting a new life away from Germany. But this idea faltered under the weight of the evidence. His belongings abandoned, his panic genuine, his lack of preparation for life on the run. Voluntary disappearances usually required planning. Lars had left everything behind. As time passed, reported sightings trickled in. A man resembling Lars was seen wandering in the countryside near Varna, disoriented and barefoot. Another was spotted hitchhiking along a highway. In Germany, some claimed to have seen him in Berlin, though none of these sightings were confirmed. Each lead raised hope, only to collapse into uncertainty. His mother refused to give up. She traveled to Bulgaria, walked the streets her son had walked, visited the hotel where he had stayed, and stood in the airport where he had last been seen alive. She pleaded with locals for information, followed up on every rumor, and worked tirelessly to keep his case alive in the media. Her pain was sharpened by the knowledge that the last time she had spoken to him, he had sounded terrified, begging for help she could not give from hundreds of miles away. The footage of Lars running out of the airport began circulating on the internet. It spread across true crime forums, YouTube channels, and social media, captivating millions. Viewers replayed it endlessly, searching for clues. Why did he run at that precise moment? Who was he looking at when he bolted from the doctor's office? Was there someone off camera? Some thought they saw fear in his eyes. Others believed it was madness. The footage became iconic, an 8-second clip that embodied the terror of unexplained disappearances. For investigators, the case grew colder with each passing month. Bulgarian police eventually scaled back their search, citing lack of evidence. German authorities opened a file, but had little jurisdiction to act abroad. Private investigators hired by the family turned up no solid leads. Each year, Lars' mother renewed appeals for information, clinging to the hope that her son was still alive somewhere, waiting to be found. The mystery of Lars Mittank deepened. Was he a victim of untreated psychosis, wandering into oblivion in a foreign land? Or had he been ensnared by forces darker and more deliberate, forces that silenced him after he fled the airport? Theories multiplied, but answers did not. And so, the image remained. A young man sprinting through Varna airport, running from something invisible, and disappearing into the fields of Bulgaria. A moment frozen in time, a question without an answer, a haunting reminder of how quickly an ordinary life can shatter into mystery. In the days and weeks following July 8, 2014, the disappearance of Lars Mittank became an open wound for his family, a mystery that refused to heal. His mother replayed her last phone calls with him over and over, searching for clues in the tremor of his voice, in the strange words he had whispered about being followed, about not being safe, about men outside his hotel. She clung to the hope that he was still alive, that he had run for a reason, and that one day he would come home. But with each passing day, the silence grew heavier. Bulgarian police scoured the fields around Varna airport, searching ditches, thickets, and roadsides. Volunteers joined, some combing the coastline, others knocking on doors in nearby villages. The countryside, however, yielded nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no body. It was as though Lars had vanished into thin air. The lack of evidence fed the speculation. If he had collapsed in the heat or drowned in a nearby river, surely something would have been found. If he had been attacked, surely there would have been signs of violence. But there was nothing. In Germany, media coverage picked up the story, framing Lars as the world's most famous missing tourist. Newspapers published his photo, a young man with blonde hair and a wide, friendly smile, his features now etched into the public consciousness. The haunting airport footage was broadcast on television, then uploaded to YouTube, where it spread virally across true crime communities. Millions of viewers watched, mesmerized, as Lars sprinted out of the terminal. Each viewer became an armchair detective, freezing frames, analyzing his expression, speculating about what had driven him to flee. The theories multiplied. Some argued Lars had suffered a psychotic break, perhaps triggered by the antibiotics he had been prescribed or by head trauma from the fight in Golden Sands. They pointed to the dilated pupils noted by the airport doctor, to his paranoid phone calls, to his erratic behavior at Hotel Color. In this version, Lars was not running from real men, but from the shadows of his own fractured mind. His sprint into the fields was the desperate act of someone consumed by hallucinations, someone who had slipped irretrievably into a world of fear. Others refused to accept this explanation. They argued that Lars had been in real danger, that his fear was not delusion but awareness. Bulgaria's resort towns had reputations for organized crime, drug activity, and occasional violence against tourists. Could Lars have crossed paths with the wrong people after the fight? Perhaps witnessed something he wasn't meant to see? Could the men he claimed were following him have been real? And could they have silenced him after he fled the airport? His sudden disappearance, some argued, bore the mark of foul play. More speculative theories suggested Lars had voluntarily disappeared. The idea of walking away from one's life, leaving behind identity and possessions, has precedent in other missing persons cases. But in Lars' situation, it seemed implausible. He left without money, without a passport, without preparation. His panic at the airport did not resemble careful planning. It resembled raw terror. Over the years, reported sightings trickled in like false beacons of hope. A truck driver claimed to have seen a man resembling Lars hitchhiking near Varna. A villager reported encountering a disoriented foreigner wandering through fields. Later, sightings were claimed as far away as Germany, the Netherlands, and even South America. Each sighting reignited hope, and each collapsed under scrutiny. None were confirmed. Lars remained missing. His mother never stopped searching. She traveled back to Bulgaria, walked through the same fields her son had vanished into, spoke to locals, and pressed investigators for answers. She kept his case alive in the media, appealing to anyone who might know something. Each year, on the anniversary of his disappearance, she renewed her call for information, unwilling to let the world forget her. As time passed, the internet adopted the case as its own. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Reddit threads ballooned with speculation, ranging from the rational to the fantastical. Some claimed the CCTV footage revealed hidden figures in the background. Others concocted elaborate conspiracies about trafficking, espionage, or cover-ups. The absence of evidence became fertile ground for imagination. What made the case so enduring was not just the mystery, but the humanity at its core. Lars was not a shadowy figure with a criminal past. He was an ordinary young man, a technician from Germany, on holiday with friends. He had no reason to vanish, no motive to abandon his life. His disappearance struck at the heart of human vulnerability, the idea that any one of us could step off a plane, take a holiday, and never return. For investigators, the trail grew colder each year. Bulgarian authorities admitted they had no leads. German police could offer little more than cooperation. Private detectives found no conclusive evidence. The fields, the coastline, the countryside, all were silent. The haunting possibility remained that Lars had died that very day, somewhere out of sight. His body never recovered. But the possibility also lingered that he had survived, that he was still out there, lost in the world. Perhaps trapped by his own fractured mind. In the years since 2014. The case of Lars Mittank has become one of the most discussed unsolved disappearances of the internet age. The footage of his sprint from Varna airport is replayed endlessly, a ghostly reminder of how quickly life can turn from normal to nightmare. His story has been called everything from Europe's most famous missing person case to the internet's greatest mystery. And still, the questions remain. Why did Lars believe he was being followed? Why did he abandon his belongings? What did he see in the doctor's office that made him run? And most of all, where did he go after he vanished into the Bulgarian fields? His mother still hopes for answers. She still dreams of seeing her son walk through the door, alive, explaining the nightmare that has haunted them for over a decade. For her, Lars is not just a mystery, not just a viral video, not just a case number. He is her child. And until the day she learns the truth, she will never stop searching for the rest of the world. The disappearance of Lars Mittank stands as a chilling reminder of how fragile life can be, how swiftly the ordinary can shatter into the unexplainable, and how even in an age of cameras and constant surveillance, A man can still run into the fields and be swallowed whole by the unknown.